much, deck building. I am your host, Demo, and this is 10 cards you should be putting in your Commander decks, episode 3. Starting out with a pretty simple one this time, Back to Nature. 1 and a green instant, destroy all enchantments. That's it. Just 2 mana, instant speed, destroy all enchantments. I think this is a pretty decent, pretty efficient removal spell in the format. I know it only hits enchantments, but it hits all enchantments for only 2 mana. That can be fantastic. I have said so many times on my channel that enchantments are some of the most important things you need to be getting off the table because they are either just really, really powerful or they are possibly shutting down something that you are doing. And if you're not running a lot of enchantments in your deck, this is an easy slot in my opinion. This is not played much in the format, and I think it needs to get more love. Coming in at number 2, Battletide, Alchemist. 3 white, Kithkin, Cleric, 3/4. If a source would deal damage to a player, you may prevent X of that damage, where X is the number of clerics you control. So, a lot of things to note here. First of all, obviously, because this is referencing clerics, people are going to think cleric tribal, and funny enough, there's a lot of cleric tribal decks out there that aren't even running this card. This card has such a powerful, possibly powerful effect that for me, it's an auto include in a cleric tribal deck, but you can even play it outside of that. And in fact, even if you just have a commander that is a cleric, and of course, there's a whole lot of commanders out there in white that are clerics, this is an easy slot in and will, of course, have X's too here because Battletide Alchemist itself is a cleric. So just this guy and your commander makes X being 2, which means anytime a source deals damage to a player, you can prevent 2 of that damage, which is pretty good. You got a buddy in your play group with a Perforos deck, it completely shuts off that Perforos. That will not do anything as long as you have just 2 clerics in play. This can be a really powerful card and can shut off a lot of decks and can actually be a political card as well because of course it says if it would deal damage to any player, you may prevent that damage. So even if your opponents are getting hit for a certain amount of damage, you can prevent it as well, sort of play some politics here. So it's kind of a neat political card as well. Obviously in Cleric Tribal, it's great, but I think it could be played outside of that as well. Coming in at number 3, another simple card with a pretty simple effect, Bedlam, 2 red enchantment. Creatures can't block, that's it. Really, really powerful effect, obviously, in a commander game. Whole bunch of decks that probably want to be doing this, just not allowing creatures to block at all. Obviously, it works on you, but if you're in that aggro-y theme, what do you care, right? You're winning by attacking, so this is going to benefit you quite a bit if you're in that goading theme as well, right? We all know goading is so popular in the format now, and this is fantastic in goad themes because, of course, they're not attacking you, so you don't care if your creatures can't block because those creatures are goaded. So fantastic fit in any of those themes. Next up, a card that I think is pretty underrated in the format, Behold the Beyond, 5 black sorcery. Discard your hand, search your library for 3 cards, put them into your hand, then shuffle. So this is a tutor that gets 3 cards. It seems pretty good. I know discarding your hand is kind of rough, but it can be worth it. And 7 mana might seem like a lot, but this to me seems like a great card to draw off the top on like turn 7 or 8 when you don't really have a lot of cards in hand. You're running out of options. Maybe you just need answers. Discard my hand. Who cares? I only have like 1 card in hand. Now I can go grab a board wipe, which is going to clean up this board so I don't die. And I can also get 2 win cons out of my deck that I can help close out the game, right? This card can very much turn the game around. Searching for 3 cards, that's a really powerful effect. I used to, with this card, go search for Shadow of the Grave, which allows me to return all the cards I just discarded to my hand. So that would be one of the cards I would go look for, and then I could look for 2 others as well. If you're in a discard theme in black, of course. Another deck I used to have this in was my Azmoran deck, because of course I don't mind discarding. That was a discard theme, so another fit for a card like this. I know discarding your hand seems rough, and 7 mana also is kind of a lot, but searching your library for 3 cards in Commander is a really powerful effect. Next up, Bequeathal. 1 green mana, aura, enchant creature. When enchanted creature dies, draw 2 cards. That is all. And of course, as I say all the time, I love cards that I can use on my opponents or I can use on myself. This is just 1 mana, draw 2 cards, right? That's pretty good. If there was any sorcery out there that was pay 1 mana, draw 2 cards, everybody would be auto-including it in their decks. Now, of course, you don't get the effect right away. You got to wait till that creature dies. It's very easy to do so if you have any deck where you are sacrificing sacrificing creatures in green. Obviously, if you're in an aura theme, also a great include. You're doing auras anyway, or enchantments, or whatever the case may be. And in fact, any of those enchantress decks, this kind of becomes draw 3 cards because you're casting an enchantment to draw a card, and then when a creature dies, you draw 2 cards. If you're planning on killing one of your opponent's creatures anyway, just throw this guy on it and then kill it to get the card draw. It's not the splashiest card ever, but 1 mana draw 2 cards, of course, is fantastic, and I think this could easily slot into a lot of decks if you're in an enchantment theme, or if you're in a theme where maybe you know you're going to be sacrificing or killing creatures a lot. Coming in at number 6, another aura. Blessing of Leeches, 2 in a black enchantment aura. Enchant creature has flash, which is very relevant. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life. Well, that's not great, but of course in the commander format, it's not really much at all. And you can pay 0 to regenerate enchanted creature. This card really, to me, flies under the radar. It doesn't look like much at all, but it is a fantastic way to protect your commander, and especially in black, which doesn't do the protect my creatures very well. Pay 0 obviously is about as low as a cost you can get for an activated ability. It doesn't get much lower than do nothing, essentially. Now, obviously, we got to talk about regenerate here. I think regenerate is fairly underrated in the commander format. It does work really, really well. It protects against damage and it protects against destroy effects, which a lot of the removal options in the format, not all, but a lot, are those effects. And this is just protecting against all of them. You don't have to do anything. Again, you just pay 0 and you can repeatedly do it. I can attack with my commander, no problem, without ever worrying about it dying in combat, because of course, any damage dealt to it, I just pay 0 and it gets regenerated. Someone casts a Blasphemous Act, no problem. I pay the 0 and regenerate it. Generous Gift, no problem. I'll just regenerate it and I get the elephant as well. This protects against a lot, and in a particularly mono black deck where you might not have a lot of great ways to protect your commander, I think this is a very underrated option. Let's talk about one of my favorite old cards, Berserk, which thankfully has been reprinted quite a bit because it used to be a pretty expensive card. It's still a little pricey, but not too shabby, and it's just such a fantastic card in the commander format, I think. 1 green mana instant, but you cast this spell only before the combat damage step. And there's a pretty specific reason for that wording. Target creature gains trample and gets +X/+O until end of turn, where X is its power. At the beginning of your next end step, destroy that creature if it attacked this turn. So of course, if you cast this on a creature that isn't attacking, it's not going to destroy it, which actually is fairly relevant. We have a lot of effects, for example, like the Rishkar's Expertise effects, which will draw cards equal to a creature's power. Hold on, I'm just going to cast a Berserk on my commander first, which is already a 6/6. Now it's a 12/6, and I will draw 12 cards off of my Rishkar's Expertise for only 1 extra mana. That seems like it's worth it, right? And the destroy at the beginning of the end step won't do anything because my commander's not attacking, it's just sitting there. So that actually can be very relevant. I have used this in my Shanna deck for a long, long time because my Shanna does get pretty big and also doesn't have trample, so giving it the trample is very significant. My commander is, say, like a 7/7. I attack with it, use this. Of course, I have to cast it before the combat damage step. It now becomes a 14/7. That's a whole lot of damage. But then at the beginning of the next end step, I have to destroy it because it did attack. However, in that deck, I'm sacrificing my commander all the time anyway. So I got a greater good in play. I now, after combat damage has been dealt, I sacrifice my commander, draw a ton of cards. It's going to die anyway, right? So that's another great way to use a card like this. And the funniest and most interesting way to use a card like this is on your opponent's creatures. As I say all the time, and I just said in this video, cards that you can use on your opponent's stuff as well as your own are great in the commander format. And of course, this does not say I gotta use it on your creature. The best way I think possibly to use this creature is I have one opponent attacking another opponent with their big scary creature. I cast Berserk on that creature, so not only is my other opponent taking double damage, but now the opponent who had the creature attacking now gets their creature destroyed. That's why it has the wording of that creature has to attack this turn. If the creature didn't attack, it just becomes a 1-mana removal spell, but it still becomes a 1-mana removal spell if that creature's attacking. So this is one of my opponents takes a ton of damage and the other opponent loses their best creature for only 1 mana. Pretty fantastic card, I think, in the commander format. Let's talk about a very interesting, very unique card that we can play in the commander format. This is one of those cards that fits in very niche scenarios. Blood Funnel, 1 and a black enchantment. Non-creature spells you cast cost 2 less to cast. That's pretty great. However, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, counter that spell unless you sacrifice a creature. Ooh boy, that's a heavy cost. This is such a unique card. Obviously, there's no card that does anything like this in the game of Magic. Gotta give cards like this a mention. It is fairly niche, I would say, although I guess if you're in any black sacrifice theme, which of course there's a ton of decks doing that, you could put it in there, right? You want to be sacrificing your creatures so it's not that bad, and having all your non-creature spells cost 2 less is pretty fantastic. You got to be careful though, right? If you run out of creatures, you're just going to end up countering all your non-creature spells. However, I will say in a deck like Endrick Sar Master Breeder, right? Whenever you cast a creature spell, create X 1/1 black thrall creature tokens where X is a spell's mana value. So that means no matter what situation I get into, I can cast my commander, because of course that's a creature spell, have that guy come down and then cast a creature spell to create all those thrall tokens, which gives me all the sack fodder that I need to then cast all my non-creature spells, right? I actually think it's a pretty good fit there. It is probably the best fit, and in fact, likely even an auto-include in one of the most unique commanders in the format, Mishra Artificer Prodigy. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may search your graveyard, hand, and or library for a card with the same name as that spell and put it onto the battlefield. If you search your library this way, shuffle it. What the heck does that have anything to do with Blood Funnel, right? Well, of course, when something gets countered, it goes to your graveyard, right? So that means if I cast an artifact spell, which is likely going to be a non-creature spell, let's say I got an Arcane Signet, I cast it for free because of course it's reduced by 2, both my Mishra and my Blood Funnel will trigger. I stack it so that the Blood Funnel resolves first. I will let it get countered. It goes to the graveyard, and then my Mishra Artificer Prodigy will say, okay, well, you just cast an Arcane Signet. You can now search your graveyard for a card that's called Arcane Signet and put it onto the battlefield. Great. So basically, I'm just casting all my 2-mana artifacts or less for free. That's a pretty good fit there, right? So essentially, it gets around the countering, which is another way you can use this card. Again, very fringe, but if for some reason your stuff can't be countered, the Blood Funnel won't do anything, right? It'll try to counter your stuff, but it will fail to do so, and you'll just get the benefit. So a lot of niche ways to use this card, but it does have a very powerful effect. Blood of the Martyr, very interesting, very unique card. Again, I like to give these cards a mention because they do fit in specific themes. This card in particular, there are 2 commanders where I think it's an absolute slam dunk. Outside of that, maybe not so much, but it is a very unique card that needs to get a mention. White, white, white instant. Until end of turn, if damage would be dealt to any creature, you may have that damage dealt to you instead. This is actually a very powerful effect, and where exactly do you use it, though, is the question. The wording here is really important. Until end of turn, if damage would be dealt to any creature. So that means if someone casts a Blasphemous Act and you cast this, all damage dealt to all creatures, of course, this is a replacement effect, will get done to you instead if you feel like the game is not going your way and you just want to end it for yourself. But obviously you're going to use it somehow to your advantage. There's probably a few interesting combos that you can throw out here. Keep in mind, this is until end of turn, so any damage that gets done over and over again, this will continue to affect it until end of turn. There are 2 commanders though, one being Michiko Konda, Truth Seeker. Whenever a source an opponent controls would deal damage to you, that player sacrifices a permanent. So this is a way to essentially force an opponent's creature to have done damage to you so that they have to sacrifice a permanent. But probably the best fit, and maybe even an auto include for this card, is Indarian King of Keldor, which used to be, I think, the most popular mono white commander in the format for a while. Has fallen off, but still pretty popular. Pretty good include there, because whenever you're dealt damage, you may create that many 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. So there is a commander. There aren't many, but there's a commander that you actually want damage dealt to you. And of course, you got your Soul Warden in play. You know, if you've ever played against those decks, that's how it works. You just gain all the life back, so it doesn't really matter a whole lot. It's just a great way to create a whole ton of white soldier tokens at instant speed. So very fringe card for sure. It definitely is a great fit in a couple of different commanders, and there's also some really neat shenanigans you can get into. So I thought I would give it a mention. I'm going to end off with Bone Dancer, one of my favorites from back in the day. I don't know, it's just a very unique, interesting card. Where exactly does it fit? I'm not sure, but I definitely think there are some decks that would like to have it. 1 black, black, zombie, 2/2. So obviously zombie, one of the most popular creature types in the format. Easily slot into there if you just want to have this fun, interesting card, because you're doing zombie tribal anyway, right? Whenever Bone Dancer attacks and isn't blocked, you may put the top creature card of defending player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. If you do, Bone Dancer assigns no combat damage this turn. So it has a couple of unique wordings here that they used to use back in the day. First of all, the attacks and isn't blocked, which means you're not actually doing combat damage. The combat damage isn't actually done. You don't really care because it's only a 2/2 anyway. You want the effect. It also references the top card of your opponent's graveyard, which again, the order of graveyard doesn't really matter anymore, but there are still cards that care about it. This is one of them. Just getting in with this guy and taking a creature from your opponent's graveyard, putting it into play seems pretty good. It's a very unique card. Where exactly you're going to play it? Like I said, zombie tribal, it does fit because it's a zombie. It fits in the I want my opponent's creatures in play under my control for various reasons. There are a few commanders like that. Maybe you're in the milling theme, so your opponents have lots of creatures in their graveyard that you can steal. Or maybe you're in the theme that I'm making my creatures unblockable or hard to block. Not a lot of those in black, but there are some. Fits there as well. Very unique card, very interesting. Thought I'd give it a mention because there's probably a lot of people out there that have not seen it before. That's what I'm doing in this series, just mentioning cards that are unique and interesting in the Commander format that you may not have ever heard of, that I think should be getting more love. You guys let me know in the comments below if you're playing any of these cards or if you're going to start playing some of these cards because of this video. That is it for the day though, and thanks for tuning in.